Halo Combat Evolved. I remember being a kid when the Xbox came out. The original controller, Duke, was obnoxiously massive. A friend of mine, Chris, said it felt manly in his hands. That is an early warning sign about how someone can start fetishizing trauma, and I feel that kind of applies to blind nostalgia as well. I eventually bought the brick. I bought this game that all my friends were raving about. I bought Halo. I still remember my first experience playing the game. Now, I replayed the same game for the first time in 20 years with its updated graphics and controls. I can still feel that same feeling I had when I was playing it as a kid, like deja vu. I remember the words I used to describe it, and I find it remarkably eloquent. Aggressively mediocre. I remember arguing with my friends that this game was lame when I was a kid, but I struggled to fully realize my feelings to articulate them in a meaningful and argumentatively devastating way. Even today, it's hard for me to nail down decisively what this game's problem is. It does, in all fairness, have a lot going for it for its time. The graphics were good, the story was kind of fun, the controls were great for a console game, the monsters were interesting, the physics engine on display was a wonderful toy, so things like vehicles were actually surprisingly delightful to drive around. Watching enemies comically ragdoll was exciting in a way that most games hadn't quite figured out yet. So what's my problem? Why do I dislike it? Am I just being a contrarian? Do I dislike it because so many people love it? Look, I've been on Xbox Live. I know that any differing opinion is met harshly with a kind of blanket hatred coming from deep inside of the instinctual monkey brain, but if you've come this far, just hear me out. In 2001, Halo was released to the public. To set the stage though, here are a few games that also came out the same year. Grand Theft Auto 3, Metal Gear Solid 2, Super Smash Bros. Melee, Devil May Cry, just to name a few. It was a revolutionary year. Grand Theft Auto 3 took the world by storm in popularity. Anyone can get popped. All cars are not only drivable but fully destructible. It led to the development of the most profitable piece of single media ever created.
Grand Theft Auto 5.
And I can't even imagine how popular the 6th installment will be, standing on the back of 3. Metal Gear Solid 2 revolutionized not just stealth but storytelling. It had such a weird, quirky personality that it speaks simultaneously from a primordial level and from somewhere in upper orbit. It's almost impossible to speak of outside-of-the-box storytelling or stealth without mentioning Kojima's genre-defining masterpiece. Super Smash Bros. Melee needs no introduction. It is the king of all party games, period. In 20 plus years since its launch, this game has had a huge fan base that is still very much active today, and has yet to be dethroned even by its own sequels. Devil May Cry diverted the Resident Evil formula into an endorphin dispensary, making every violent movement palpable, serving up cool and fun like 2 scoops of ice cream in a chocolate-dipped cone. Without Devil May Cry, we arguably would not have games like Bayonetta or God of War today. Things to think about. Does Halo Combat Evolved deserve to be seated next to these games? Halo, which did nothing new, nothing revolutionary. It did a bunch of things that had already been done and simply polished them to a high-gloss sheen. And yet, I find this game remarkably dull. If you aren't totally familiar with Halo's campaign or need a quick refresher, I made a TLDR video that goes through the entire campaign in depth, beat for beat, in about 3.5 minutes. I strongly recommend checking it out. An interesting aspect of Halo today versus the original release is that with the upgraded graphics comes a number of problems. In particular, beyond the new visuals and cutscenes stuttering under its own weight, I found that a lot of the difficulty and personality of the original game came from the need for the flashlight, which is all but obsolete with the new visuals. The light choices created tension as well as masked the bland environments, making the glowing eyes and hot plasma fire from the Covenant that much more intimidating. That is a considerable change that really morphs the experience as a whole. Well, you know that, and giving the AI Cortana just enough polygons to turn her into a sex symbol. So, if you're playing the Anniversary Edition of Halo, consider weighing out your graphic options. Or, you know, you can just push tab to swap it out whenever. When I began digging into this game with a critical perspective, I really looked hard at the base strengths that seemingly everyone had loved about this experience, and I see that I had initially looked at a lot of the game's strengths as its weaknesses. If you had opened a book and read sci-fi classics from like a half a century before this game was conceived, you'll see Halo lore isn't anything special or particularly unique. That being said, if this is your first time really dipping into sci-fi, the story is easy to follow, and the adventure of one man destroying a super weapon makes for an easily digestible premise. The player character, Master Chief, is made of cardboard, but when he does speak, the voice actor sells confidence. His stoicism and deep, impossibly intimidating masculine voice, on top of being an unstoppable destructive force, makes Chief an idyllic hero.
We'll be fine.
Having an inspiring orchestra play when I'm backtracking rooms full of enemies I've already killed doesn't feel great, but when it hits at the right moment, it feels every bit like being a champion overcoming the universe. The weapon balance feels a bit off, particularly the rifle, and jumping has just enough input lag and floatiness that it feels a bit like playing as a balloon velcroed to the ground. Other than that, the general movement and aiming is arguably the best thing this game has done. The combat, for its time and place, was unbeatable. The game has never been bad, pretty much objectively. I wouldn't give it a perfect score, but truth be told, I can see now exactly why everyone loved Halo. Halo Combat Evolved set a precedent for shooters. If you can't build a game to this standard, don't bother. No one was exempt. All games will be compared to the genre's baseline. In this case, for years, the Halo name became so dominant the narrative turned to the creation of a quote Halo killer game. Companies began pushing around gimmicks and distinguishing mechanics, but it seems, in this era at least, no one could take the throne because no one could reproduce the pristine principles that Halo did so well. This game is like ice cream. Some like chocolate, some like Rocky Road, some mint and chip. But you can't have any of them without a vanilla base. Halo is vanilla ice cream. It's not fancy with features, and it doesn't do anything special other than doing vanilla just right. I'm just not into vanilla.